So obviously the purpose of tonight is to try and bring as many clubs together just to be able to talk through the Community Resilience Fund. So I'm just about to share my screen with you, which hopefully will show up for you. Perfect. So yeah, the purpose of tonight is to obviously discuss the Community Resilience Fund, answer any questions you may have, and probably provide a degree of confidence for you that in filling out the form or making an application, some confidence that it's going to be worth your while doing so, and that we will expedite funds as best as we can in light of COVID-19 for those that have experienced hardship as a result of the obviously pandemic and the government's response to that pandemic. So I'll start by just saying that the Community Resilience Fund is obviously administered by Sport Bay of Plenty on behalf of Sport New Zealand. So Sport New Zealand's fund across the country is $15 million. A chunk of that comes to the Bay of Plenty, and then we distribute that on their behalf. So we don't take any fees or anything to do that. We do that kind of in good faith, I suppose, because we know that our communities are kind of hurting at this point, and that there's limited funds available, and yet the wolf never stops knocking at the door, and certain things still need to be paid for. So the idea behind that is to try and give you some relief at this time. In terms of the process for today, obviously we've talked about disabling your cameras and your mics, if you can do that, if you can. But if you want to ask any questions, there's a live chat function, which is on your sound or on your screen, should I say, on the calling bar. If you want to put any questions that you've got, it doesn't matter how trivial you think they may be or how out there you think they may be, please make sure that you put those in. Alternatively, at the end, we will have some question time at the end as well, so we can answer those there if you don't feel comfortable. I've started to record this meeting already. So as long as everybody's okay with that, what we'll be able to do is put that up on our website, and we can get the link to that out for you. So if there's anything that we cover today that you feel you need to know, you might need to feel you revisit it, or you didn't quite catch what was said, then there's always a chance to go back and watch it again if you need to. So if you've got any questions, feel free to use the live chat. Otherwise, we can wait until the end and go through the questions that you might have. I'm joined today, I won't spin the screen round, but Dave Clark, who's our coaching and sport development lead, and Zane Jensen, who's our Spaces and Places and community sport lead. They're helping to manage the fund as well. So if they've got anything they want to add, you might have to excuse me while I quickly turn the screen round and show you their faces. They put their makeup on for you and everything. So I'll try and paint them in the best light they can. And if you've got anything they want to add, then they can add that. So as kind of already alluded to, the Resilience Fund is about delivering funding to regional organisations. So that's regional sports organisations like Bay of Plenty Rugby, Bay of Plenty Badminton, and also local organisations as well, which historically, I suppose, for this group is largely sports clubs and ABC Badminton Club and Rangatoa Sports Club and those kind of people. So there's two facets to it. There's the regional side, but there's also the localised side as well. The purpose really is to try and give all of those organisations the greatest opportunity that we can to be able, so that they can remain financially viable through what is a very tumultuous and difficult period for everybody. So obviously with the government's response to COVID-19 going into lockdown for more than 4 weeks, more than 4 weeks in the end, and then into level 3 for a few weeks as well. That obviously has created, a lack of income, but expenses still need to be paid. So it's a direct response to the difficulties that we face. So the fund's open, obviously, RSOs, local clubs, recreation providers, and Māori organisations as well. So we've got a wide range of people that this fund is going to be available to. So the fund is open to organisations that, and I'm going to give you the slide in a moment, so don't worry too much about wondering what the list is, but a group of affiliated Sport New Zealand partners. As an example, a Sport New Zealand affiliated partner for Sport New Zealand might be Badminton New Zealand. Badminton New Zealand then have a regional sports organisation, which is Bay of Plenty Badminton, and they pay an affiliation fee or some kind of membership through to their national organisation. And then the clubs in the Bay of Plenty pay an affiliation fee through to the Bay of Plenty Badminton Association. So it's about the organisations within that chain that essentially from the bottom to the top end up with some kind of connection as part of that Sport New Zealand partner network. It's also open, as I said, to Hiauranga Pautama Māori national sports organisations. So there's a whole host of different people that can obviously apply to this fund. So it's really quite wide, and obviously the purpose of today is to try and give you some confidence to be able to apply to it, knowing that your application is hopefully going to be successful. So just to touch on the Sport New Zealand Group partner organisations or their partner list, that probably looks quite small on your screen, but there's all your normal kind of obvious candidates that you would realise. There'll be New Zealand Rugby will be on there, NZRL will be on there, but there's a whole host of others as well that potentially some people may think wouldn't make it onto that list, like maybe synchronised swimming. But yeah, they've really widened the goalposts, I suppose, to be as inclusive as they possibly can. There's maybe some on there that some people might contest should or shouldn't be on there, but this all falls out of organisations that New Zealand has an investment with, and that they kind of align on the outcomes that they're trying to achieve, and generally that is underpinned by some kind of investment by Sport New Zealand to them as a national organisation. As I say, when we send out the recording, we'll also send through a copy of this presentation. So if you want to go through the list and see where you kind of fit, or if you fit, then you can obviously have a look through that in your own time. So to move more specifically to what the fund will cover, we're very much talking about fixed costs at this stage. So fixed costs, you can see there's a list of them there. So there's things like insurance, power, phones, rent and facility hire, equipment hire, FPOS fees, rates, audit fees, IT contracts. If you've got a certain IT provider that charges you a monthly fee to be able to manage all of your computers and that kind of things, that kind of stuff. Things like Xero accountancy software, MYOB, you can apply for those kind of costs under this fund. The cost of events or programs that had to be cancelled, not just delayed because of COVID-19, where those costs can't be eliminated. So to be really clear on that, or as clear as we possibly can be, it may be that you were hosting an event that was going to take place in mid-April, and that event was for a swimming group, and they had to hire a swimming pool as a result from the council. If the council continued to charge them for that hireage, then you were able to apply for the cost of that through this fund. So that is essentially a cost that you can't get out of paying, so it becomes a fixed cost. What you can't apply for is costs associated with programs that you run, really. So or things that you're moving forward and you're going to delay. So if you say, well, we can't have the event in April, but we are going to have it in July or in October or in September, if you know you're going to have it, then you can't apply for it here and then obviously continue to run with that moving forward. So they're the kind of things that are covered. Now, I'm aware that list is not necessarily really exhaustive. There are probably other fixed costs that you have. An example would be a netball club or a netball centre usually has to pay for security costs to be tied up to a new tech or watchdog or somebody like that. And that's a fixed cost monthly that they incur to make sure that their facility is, if there's an issue, and somebody breaks in, the alarm goes off, and then that security provider goes down and obviously does an assessment or does whatever they need to do. So there are going to be other costs that are fixed that are not on that list. So that list is not the be all and end all, but it's just a kind of good baseline example of some of the things that would be funded. On the basis that the maximum that a club can apply for is $1,000. that list probably then does become quite extensive. If you pay for some of those items, you're probably well over $1,000 before you get to the fourth item on the list. So hopefully that gives you some scope as to what can and can't be included. So specifically, the fund doesn't cover the cost of new programs or events. So new programs or events that are going to take place. So new ideas, effectively. It doesn't cover costs that are incurred outside of the period of March to June 2020. So anything outside of that. So if you pay a monthly fee for your insurance, and you include the monthly fee that you pay for July, then that bit wouldn't be eligible, but the bit for June would be. And costs associated with professional athletes, professional sports teams and academies, or rep teams as well. None of that can be included. Capital costs, which are obviously anything to do with the facilities that some of you may own. I don't know if any of you have got facilities, but you know, if you're going to re-roof the centre, that's not going to be covered via this fund. And then there's also the costs that are covered by other relief arrangements. So obviously you will all know, or will have definitely heard of, I'm sure, of the wage subsidy, there's talk about that obviously being extended. And there's a whole range of packages that have been announced. So I suppose in full disclosure, we don't want double dipping through this fund where there are other opportunities to access funds to cover some of those other things. Equally so, if you've been given, which some of you may have, I know in Tauranga, some people have been given things like rent relief, or cancellation fees have not been, or councils haven't charged cancellation fees, you obviously then can't, we're asking you in good faith not to try and claim those things as well. So there's a number of things that they obviously won't cover. Definitely doesn't cover people. That's what the wage subsidy is for. And there'll be a link which is included as part of this presentation. If you want more information around that wage subsidy, it links through to Sport New Zealand, and then there's more information available there. So people, or the costs with people, are very much excluded from this fund. So I've got a question that's just coming from Carl. Does the period of coverage now include March, not just April to June? I believe that the correct, kind of depends how you term it. I think because we didn't go into lockdown until the 25th of March or 26th of March, they're saying from March to June, but essentially that was kind of the start of April. So everything I know, or everything we know, it covers the full month of April, full month of May, and full month of June, and that's probably the best period or time for you to be able to aim for in terms of the costs that you've incurred. But that is a little bit misleading. I understand, but I do think it was just where we didn't go into lockdown until the very end of March. So therefore, as this fund has come about, and it's obviously come around quite quickly, there's probably been a few bits that have slipped through, and technically that should say April, May and June 2020. So hopefully that answers your question, Carl. If it doesn't, please make another comment and we will try our best to give you some clarity. So who can't apply? Obviously those organisations in Appendix A, which was that list, so Badminton New Zealand can't apply for the Community Resilience Fund. They're simply providing information to Sport New Zealand to confirm who the affiliates are as we travel through the various regions and then sub-regions across the country. Organisations that aren't affiliated to an organisation in that list. So we've had a few organisations that have applied that actually don't come under anyone in that list. So at this stage, and I will say at this stage because potentially that could change, but at this stage those organisations can't apply. We're hopeful that we're able to try and get a little bit more wiggle room than we've currently got to be able to include as many organisations as we can. But at this point in time, if you don't affiliate to somebody on that list, then you're not eligible to apply. But if that is the case and you want to take that a little bit further, you can get in touch with us directly and we will do our best to advocate on your behalf to Sport New Zealand if your primary purpose is providing services that keep people active and you know, are kind of good for our community. So we're definitely keen to do that. Individuals, so the private tennis coach definitely cannot apply for this. The private squash coach can't apply for this, so it has to be for an organisation. Schools and other educational institutions. So schools are probably one of the few organisations around the country that funding will not have been affected by COVID-19. So obviously, therefore, they're not able to apply at this time for anything in relation to the Community Resilience Fund. Professional sports teams, you would have heard that in the budget announcement towards the end of last week. I believe that professional sport teams are probably in the process of arranging some kind of financial relief for themselves, so they're not included in the fund either. Profit-based businesses or commercial organisations, facilities managers or owners, so that would be your, if you've got a facility, your landlord can't apply for this. The person that leases the facility, probably they definitely can. So the squash club can if they lease the facility from someone, but if you own the building, then you're not allowed to apply if you're the facility manager or owner. Local councils definitely can't apply. Regional Sports Trust, which is us, so we can't apply to the fund. NSOs, which is essentially the Appendix A as well, so that's National Sports Organisations, they're not allowed to apply. And then other organisations that receive investment directly from Sport New Zealand or other government agencies. So there's a group of people on there that obviously, that list is, once you break each of those lists apart, that list gets very big, but that's a kind of high level overview of who can or who can't apply for this fund. So the limits, and I've spoken purely to club at this stage or association, depending on the terminology that you use for your group, but there are two limits in place. But for clubs or local associations, the maximum amount of money you're able to apply for is $1,000. We've been granted, I suppose, or regional sports trusts have been granted the autonomy to make that money flow. So the idea is that this is not a painful process for you, albeit there is some form filling in to do, which none of us enjoy, but unfortunately is part of the modern world that we're in. But we do have the ability to be able to advocate on your behalf and to obviously try and make that fund work for you. So we essentially want two things to happen. We want you to fill the forms out as painlessly as possible and us to get you as much money as possible. That's our kind of primary goal in terms of the local club or association, if that's what you want to call it, in the outlook that we have against it. And Sport New Zealand are fully supportive of that. The $1,000 we recognise is definitely not going to change the world. It's a drop in the ocean compared to probably what a lot of people need at this time. So therefore, there shouldn't really be too much red tape wrapped around that $1,000. And our job is to try and get you that money as much of that money as we can to you as quickly as we possibly can. So we do have the autonomy to be able to do that. I think to date there is not one organisation that's applied to the fund so far that hasn't received something. So we haven't actually had to reject anybody at this stage. So you can see we're trying to take the best parts of your application and make them work for you. So in terms of how to apply, everything is up on our website, but the application period at the moment is opened on the 11th of May and closes on the 19th of June. There is a chance some of those dates may be extended, but at this stage, I would encourage you to get your applications in as soon as you can. Notably, because I'll jump to the bottom of the page, but notably because it's a rolling fund. So we assess applications every day. They get assessed in a preliminary sense, and then every second day they're assessed by an assessment panel who ultimately then part with X amount of dollars based on the applications that we've received. So I suppose what that means is that once this fund is gone, it's gone. So the sooner you put an application in, obviously, the better chance you've got of being granted, obviously, everything that you're after and that's eligible within the criteria as well. So the sooner you get your application in, you kind of know there's more money there at that stage than there will be in a week's time. So if you can get those in as soon as you can, that would be great. Everything has to be submitted online. So there's a page on our website. There's two forms. There's one for a regional organisation, and then there's one for a local organisation. If you go through that platform, then you can just fill the information out. There's a few attachments we ask you to include, but hopefully it's not too painful, and then that just makes the whole process makes the whole process a lot quicker for us. As I said before, that then comes through to the assessment panel, which we have here. There's 4 or 5 of us on that panel. If there is any information in your application that we need further clarity on, we will come back to you. It's quite rare with a club application, but sometimes if something is baffling us or we don't quite understand, if there's something else that we want to know, we'll get on the phone and we'll give you a call. And very often it is just a phone call. It's not a can you resubmit the application. We can kind of do all of that part for you. We just sometimes on certain things need a little bit of clarity around what information has been supplied, but largely it's relatively pain-free and it's all quite basic stuff. So hopefully you find it to be the same as we're finding it. So 2 things I just want to run through, and they are just obviously just confirming kind of what we've spoken about tonight and really around the criteria. I just want to try and share with you a couple of applications, and these are made up. I made them up earlier. So this isn't what anybody's put in. This is obviously what we've made up just so that you can see an example of a positive one and a negative one. I might just ask Delwyn, can you see my screen?
Yep, just the links. I can only see the links.
Okay, hold fire. Just give me 2 secs while I just bring up the right one. Just give me 2 secs, folks. I'll be back with you in 1 minute.
Yeah, I can see that it's very small.
Okay. That better? Oh.
Yep, that's better.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this obviously is a successful application. So question 1 is obviously how you're applying or what type of group you are and who you associate yourself with. So that will be the sport for this organisation. It would be the Sport New Zealand Partner Group, and then who that is. So if I was a badminton club, that would say Badminton New Zealand. Albeit there is a link there's a step between the club and Badminton New Zealand, which is Bay of Plenty Badminton. They're just basically looking to try and connect the dots through their existing system. It will then go through and ask you what the organisation name and all of those kind of standard details are, and also ask you if you're a charitable trust, incorporated society, and then if you are one of those, then you'll obviously be prompted to put in what your charitable trust number is or your IS number would be. Then there'll be some normal personnel details that we'd ask for, and then as we get through to your bank details at number 8, 7, 8, and 9. We're just asking you to give us a bank statement or even a screenshot. So it could just be a picture that you've taken with your phone, just so that we can confirm basically that when we make the payment, that we're making it to the details that line up with 7 and 8, just so that payment doesn't get held up to you as well. We are asking you to tell us just how many members your club serves. So if it was a badminton club and they had 40 members, that's just statistical information for us so that we can kind of work out, or Sport New Zealand can work out essentially maybe how far their money went against the participants nationally. And they may break some of that information down, but it's just an internal treatment. So a couple of questions that come out of this. How's COVID-19 impacted the financial viability of your organisation? Describe the specific changes and reasons for them. For example, actual or budgeted loss of revenue and what caused this. So obviously, an easy one to talk about would be that at the moment and for the last 7 weeks or so, all pokie machines have been closed to the public. So therefore, the funding pool that's available to apply for through Class 4 gaming has either depleted, gone down, or non-existent. So obviously, that is one way that it's obviously impacted your organisation. It might also be that if you were a golf club, and until the ban, I believe the ban on playing golf was lifted at some stage between level 4 and 3, but they wouldn't have been able to take any green fees. So again, this information is not really, it's not an assessment of you. It's just our general understanding of how COVID-19 has impacted your organisation. We will then ask what actions you've taken to minimise that impact. Now, I want to be clear that for some of you, you won't have any actions that you will have been able to implement. But for some, if you've got a facility, it might be that you've turned all your fridges off, you've changed your the rate that your power gets supplied at to a standard rate or a fixed rate as opposed to something else. And I suppose both of those questions are just us looking for a level of reasonableness around what the impact is and then what you've kind of done, what you've proactively done to try and minimise that. But do understand that there'll be situations where you can't do anything to minimise that, and it kind of is what it is. We're asking to know what your income was for the last financial year. So whenever your last financial year accounts were, there's about a 2-year or an 18-month grace period in there. So whenever your last financials were completed, just give us whatever that statistic was, and then whatever your new financial year or current financial year is expected to be. So you can see in this one, there's 135,000 that came in last year. That was our revenue stream. And this year we've dropped to 90,000. And we would put a common sense lens over that and probably assume that that will be because there's a drop in Class 4 gaming. There's been let's say a 3-month window whereby you weren't able to access any funds. You weren't able to charge your members maybe for potentially things that you would charge them for in the past. So that's where that kind of connection comes between those two questions. We're essentially probably assuming that there should be a drop between the answer to question 13 and probably the answer to question 14. Then we move into what the administration costs look like. So last year, and this is question 15 is nothing to do with the table. We're looking for what your fixed administration costs were last year, excluding wages and program delivery costs. So if I added up all of my electricity, my rates, my insurance, the rent that I pay, whatever it might be, I would then land on what that annual figure would look like. And then as you input what those costs are in that 3-month window, that basically gives us the formula that we need to work off to be able to take the application forward and assess it. So you can see there, these guys have included, or these guys, they're not really guys, it was me making things up, but you've got electricity bill over a 3-month period. So if it was 500 a month, that totals 1,500. Gas bill 500, insurance 400, etc., etc., etc. And that brings the total costs for that period up at $4,400. So hopefully that makes sense. Just remember, if you've got any questions, keep them in the live chat. If I don't see any questions come up, then I'll just keep going. So we've got 4,400 in terms of the costs you're applying for. At question 18, we then ask what your current balances are of your accounts. Now you can imagine the reason for that is that if you're asking for $1,000 and you're sitting on 10 million in the bank, then that $1,000 may be better spent on an organisation that's living off the smell of an oily rag, let's say. So it's really just a sort of sense of reasonableness that we're pushing money into the right places as best as we can. I don't anticipate anybody is probably sitting on $10 million. If they are, then talk to me afterwards. I've got some great investment ideas for you. But yeah, it's just trying to really get a bit of a picture of where your finances currently sit. It's also noted that in there, potentially, if you were sitting on 100 grand, you may have sidelined 50 grand to build a facility, and that's okay. Not a question. It's just a question so that we can kind of lay it into all of our different fields and then make an informed decision, which largely is to give you $1,000 more often than not. So don't see it as a negative, whatever you do. Then we ask for your financial statements, and then we ask you to attach an invoice for the amount that you are applying for. So for example, this one, the total fixed cost they're applying for is $4,400, but the maximum amount is obviously $1,000. So we'd be looking on this application to receive an invoice attached to it that was for $1,000 plus GST if they're GST registered, because we can't exceed that $1,000 limit, if that makes sense. So the reason we're asking for that here is so that if we make the assessment today, let's say, which we made a number of them today, they'll likely be paid tomorrow, but we can only pay if we've got the invoice. So we're just trying to minimize that toing and froing, or us sort of hassling you on the phone trying to get obviously the information that we need in order to be able to make payment. And then at the bottom there, they're just a series of tick boxes, which are just your kind of standard caveats, I suppose, that you're able to submit this on behalf of your organisation. You've read the guidelines. Importantly, the one at the bottom is very important, that you're happy for us to share information. As you can imagine, there's lots of funds across communities at the moment through councils, through funders, all trying to do great things. But in order to do great things, we need to work in a coordinated way so that we're not funding the same thing twice from two different pots, if that makes sense. So we are working with a number of funders to minimise or mitigate that happening. So obviously they're just the normal kind of tick boxes, but do read them before you tick and hit submit. Does that make sense to everybody? I will take silence as positive. If you've got any questions, please pop them into the chat, and the guys will answer them as we go. And I'll just jump on and find another. Just kill my camera and mic for a minute, just while I find the unsuccessful application. So we're back. Hopefully everybody can hear us. We've found the document that we need. I understand there's a couple of questions that have just come in, so I might just address those to start with. So obviously a question from Anne, which it looks like Zane has responded to. So if that's okay, Anne, if there's anything else you need, just add another comment. Question from Lynn, is there any discussion around a fund to support either training costs for families who are forced to cancel or severely reduce children's participation in sport due to COVID, or program development to encourage people back into sport? The short answer is probably that we don't really know, but there is a I believe there is a physical activity fund coming as a package. We don't know a lot more about it than obviously it's been announced potentially as part of the wider relief package, but we're waiting on information ourselves before we can probably comment on that any further. But suppose the issue is that we're a regional organisation delivering a fund at this point on behalf of Sport New Zealand and on behalf of government, and those decisions will come from the top. I would fully support what you're sort of alluding to in terms of there will be families that are suffering, and I fully support a package being put together to try to help those families and to obviously try and encourage people back into sport as well. And we'll advocate for that, but we will take our lead from Sport New Zealand and the government and keep our fingers crossed that there is something coming. So I have heard positive things on the grapevine, but I wouldn't like to say what they are too much in case they don't come through. Any other comments? Can you reapply for the new account, which is an annual accounting cost? The answer is no. You're only allowed to apply once, Jenny. But we will talk to Sport New Zealand if we can and see if something at work. If there's a situation where something's been kind of missed, then we can take that back to them and see if we've got any wiggle room to be able to adjust that. But I believe you've been talking to Belinda, so I'll talk with Belinda and we'll come back to you on that separately. Dave's covered Maylene's question, and there aren't any others in there at the moment. Cool, so I'll just share, and this is the last thing I've got tonight, if I can find it, an unsuccessful application. So Delwyn, you can see that?
Yep.
Thank you. So obviously, exactly the same process, you know, who the partner affiliate is, names, and all of the normal kind of details. But I'll basically give you the rundown on why this one would be unsuccessful, and it's probably fairly common. When we get down to the costs down here, there are costs there, rent of facility. So if we was taking, and this is all made up, but if we was taking $500 that was being charged by Bay Venues, let's say, but we know that Bay Venues gave a rent relief or a facility hireage relief during that period, that becomes an irrelevant cost. Some of the equipment that's been purchased can still be used, so therefore that wouldn't be covered. Number three, the coordinator fees to pay the club manager. I know that's wishful thinking for most clubs, that they can pay someone to be a manager. That'd be great, but very occasionally it does happen, but obviously that's related to wages and people costs, so that wouldn't be included. Fees paid for rep uniforms, because representative costs aren't covered under this, that wouldn't qualify either. And then insurance costs, April, May and June would be covered. So this application would go from a $2,450 application, knowing they can only get a maximum of $1,000, and we would chop that down based on which of those cost items are actually able to be covered. And on first glance, it would be $450 to cover those insurance costs. Hopefully that makes sense. That is generally the only difference between the two. Everything else is absolutely fine, but it is really just trying to hone in on what is covered and what isn't covered. I recognise some of it may sound a bit grey. If it is grey, go to our website, fill out the web form, where you can ask questions or you can get an assigned contact from there. And then that person will be able to come back to you and talk to you specifically about what may or may not be included, or what you're thinking of putting in, or what you're not thinking of putting in. I suppose the reality is that for only $1,000, hopefully there's not too many hurdles you've got to get over to get up to that magic figure. But if that is the case, then we will obviously take the info from the web form, we'll come back to you, and we'll work closely with you to try and get as much of that money through to you as we possibly can. Everything else is all absolutely the same, no other difference there. So I'll stop sharing and come back to the screen. So as far as the tonight goes, that's pretty much all we had. We didn't have anything else that we were going to cover, but obviously now is a chance if anybody wants to be brave enough to unmic themselves and ask a question, then we're, as a three, we're more than happy to answer those as best as we can. So I'll hand it over to you if anyone's got a question.
Can you hear me, George? Is George talking?
Yep, got you, George.
Okay, well, I'm representing the Eastern Bay of Plenty Rugby Sub-Union, which is not a club in such. We are a middle body between the union and the clubs, and we administer the Minister of the Sport and also hire Rugby Park in Wakatani here, which we have to pay costs for the grandstand and the lights, etc., etc. So, not being a club, would I be allowed to make an application?
I'm going to let Zane jump in on that one. He's probably going to give you a much more accurate answer than I can.
All right, hi there, George. There we go. So got rid of the feedback. I'm going to give you a real political answer here and play the politician card. Karen has passed this one up the chain because I guess our understanding is, yeah, you would be deemed a club, you know, of similar to all the other rugby clubs, and Eastern Bay Union, as you know, Central Bay Union are affiliated to Bay of Plenty Rugby, which then affiliate to New Zealand Rugby. So we've just gone back to Sport New Zealand today. Karen and I were speaking about this one earlier. So she's gone back to Sport New Zealand, and hopefully they'll come back to it with an answer for us tomorrow. If not, it'll be first thing Monday, and we'll be able to check in from there, and Karen can give you a hand to put that together.
Okay, yeah, that's what I spoke to Karen and I sent her a copy of our affiliation to the Bay of Plenty, and also I don't think I'll have any problem. The only thing I'll be applying for, I think, would be power, and I'll look at the higher charge for the grounds for those 3 months. Although this, at the present stage, the Wakatani District Council has not sent us an account for the hire of the grounds for the season. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, George. I think just a good example of probably where I see our role in this, more so than being somebody that just signs checks and gives money out to what fits within a criteria, but you know, sometimes asking the difficult questions of Sport New Zealand, I suppose, albeit fully supportive of their approach to trying to get money out to communities, but we need to advocate on behalf of who our communities are and how they fit within a system, because the system is not the same for every code is different, every region is different. I mean, we take Taupo in our region, it creates all sorts of not controversies, but for some codes it includes Taupo and for some it doesn't. So that's where I see our role being crucial, is to try and make sure that we put your voice across that table to see what we can, to see how we can leverage our relationship to do the best we can for you. So thank you. Anybody else got any questions out there? No? Okay, that's awesome. I never quite know how to end these online meetings. When you ask questions at the end, you always feel like you're just kind of cutting everybody off and they might really want to say something, but I genuinely hope that's not the case. Thank you for taking the time tonight to listen to what we've said, and hopefully it does make things a bit clearer. And quite frankly, I suppose the message is that we want you to have the money that is there for you. So if there's something we can do to try and help that, that's what we're here for. And don't be afraid to reach out via the web form. And we can assign people to try and help you through this process. And we know how important it is that you, we know how important, sorry, should I say, the services that you provide across all parts of the bay for, you know, all sorts of kids from age dot right through to to my age, which is really old, but and maybe a little bit older as well. But we know how important it is, and we really value everything that you do. So I'll leave it there. If you've got any other comments, this chat will probably stay live for a while, and you can always add them in. We get notifications from them. So if you do get anything come in, then yeah. But yeah, until then, we'll speak again at some stage, I'm sure. And yeah, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.